who is juror number 11. Mr. Rogers, would you like to have the jury poll?
No, Your Honor.
All right. You may be seated, Ms. Geiger. We're going to take a break. You all will have a long lunch break today, and we will resume court at 1 p.m. Okay?
All right. Everybody clear the courtroom, we'd appreciate it. Head out.
And it's not surprising. I mean, the charge was very complex. So for them to have some legal questions, especially about the castle doctrine and manslaughter and how it all works together, it's not surprising.
This jury was made up of 8 women and 4 men. Do you think the makeup of the jury would have played any role here?
You know, I don't know. I definitely think the makeup of the jury does play a role. I don't know if gender by itself has how much that would have much to do with it, but certainly all the factors that make up the jury. You know, it seems like they were fairly representative of Dallas County. But I think, you know, I was curious yesterday about what their work status was, you know, education, degree level, kind of thing like that. All of those factors do play in.
What do you think connected with the jury? I mean, what of the prosecution's arguments connected?
Well, I think number one, that this was an innocent man in his own home. You know, it's hard to, if you were truly like these jurors said they were and didn't have a lot of exposure to this case, you know, that headline, so to say, you know, would be pretty shocking to them, I think. So just that fact. But I think they must not have believed her story completely about her thinking it was her apartment, or they believed that must have been something that it wasn't reasonable to really think that you're going to miss all these clues, walk in, and then, you know, automatically assume that the person there is there to do you harm and pull out your gun. You know, and maybe they did assume that all those things could have been reasonable up to the point where she got through the door, but they must have really latched on to the prosecution's argument that once she got to that door,
she had
other options, and she should have taken those options.
Because she wasn't fully in the apartment.
Right. And she wasn't fully in the apartment when she, I think by her own testimony, even began to hear sounds and voices inside, or a voice inside, some sounds coming from inside. So at that point, she should have taken other steps, called back up, what have you.
How much do you think her training would have played a part in this jury's decision?
I think obviously if they went guilty, they must have thought that she's not like you and me. You know, she's got other resources. She's been through the scenario many times, even if it's just in a training situation. You know, she has the ability, or at least she should have had the ability, to overcome that initial fear or anxiety that you have when your adrenaline is running and you go from 0 to 10, as the lawyers were putting it. So the lawyers must have thought her training makes her different than me and you, and that's what essentially the prosecution was arguing as well.
So walk our viewers through what's coming next. What's the process now that she's been found guilty? What can they expect?
So now that she's been found guilty, what's going to happen next is we move into the punishment phase. Whether we do that this afternoon, which I would fully expect.
It sounds like it. She's told the jury to be back at 1 o'clock.
Yeah, so they're going to begin hearing punishment evidence. So this will be the stage of the trial where both sides get to present. They can present basically the facts of the case over again, not in any great depth, but just to remind the jury about how shocking this case was, how unnecessary it was, focus on Mr. Jean and his life and the loss of his family. You could expect maybe another family member, maybe a sister again, to testify as to the family's loss. But you're also going to hear that most likely from Ms. Geiger's side. This is her chance, her family's chance to also speak out and say, this isn't really my daughter, this isn't really my sister, you know, have mercy on her. So we know she can't get probation, so I'm assuming that the defense will be asking for a very, very low prison time.
Minimum of 5.
As minimum of 5, but somewhere in that lower range.
Do they take her into custody awaiting the sentencing phase?
Most likely they will. You know, if we don't get a punishment verdict today, most likely the judge will take her into custody until she can file that appellate bond. You know, it's all dependent on the sentence that she actually gets. If she gets 10 years or less, then she can appeal to the judge to give her a bond so she can be out of jail while her appeal is waiting, assuming she's going to appeal it, which I would expect she would. If it's 11 years or more, then she's not applicable to apply for that and she'll have to be in prison while her appeal is pending.
Where do you think the defense failed here?
Well, I think obviously the defense didn't counter strongly enough that her training wasn't a factor here, or shouldn't have been considered a factor here. That at that time she was more like me and you, and not like a trained officer. I remember commenting when she testified that I didn't think she was as descriptive as she could have been. She could have relayed to the jury more of what really her day felt like from her own point of view, just to give the jury some perspective of what she was going through on that day. Would have it made a difference? I'm not sure at this point, but I think the defense could have been a little clearer, a little more forceful with their story.
You surprised by how quickly this decision came back?
A little bit, yeah. It's
Hold on a second, they're about to take us live on TV, so we're going to reset. I'm Tanya Iser with Channel 8. I'm here joined by Rob Conyas, a former judge. We are have within the last few minutes heard the decision that Amber Guyger has been found guilty by this jury of 8 women and 4 men, guilty of murder. Judge Conyas, what's your reaction to this verdict?
Well, I've always thought that the prosecution had the hardest road to go down. So I'm not going to lie and say I'm not a little surprised that they achieved it, because they did have the harder burden to prove. I probably would have been less surprised if it was the manslaughter verdict, but obviously the prosecution's version of the facts resonated with the jury. They must have thought that she had options other than going through the door, pulling out her gun, and shooting Mr. Jean.
And they clearly rejected mistake of fact.
Yes, and probably we were just talking about how maybe her training might have hurt her in this situation, because she's not like me and she's not like you. She's practiced this scenario with other police officers. She's been trained, literally drilled on what to do when you encounter intruders. Whereas me and you, we're going to have to work it out for ourselves. And so maybe the jury wasn't giving her the benefit of the doubt that me or you might have gotten in the similar situation.
And they just didn't buy that a man who's sitting on his couch eating a bowl of ice cream is a threat. Yeah,
I mean, if these jurors are like they said that they were, that they hadn't really been overly exposed to this story, that scenario might have been kind of shocking to a few of them. That we're talking about a man who was eating ice cream in his own house, and a few seconds later he's dead. That could be shocking to them, and so I could see where that shock might have been in their mind during the whole case, and I don't want colored their view of the evidence. I'm not trying to say that negatively. It's just the way their frame of mind was going through the case.
Well, after this verdict, we saw tears of joy and a lot of hugging from Botham Jean's family. We also saw tears from Amber Guyger. She is just now leaving the courtroom. She had a good defense team. I mean, these are well-respected attorneys. What were their mistakes in this case?
Well, they are very well-respected attorneys. I know Toby and Robert both, and several of the other lawyers on her team, as I know the Jason Hermes. I think I kind of commented on it when we were watching her testify, that I really felt like she needed to hit a home run, because this case was going to come down to her testimony. She didn't really hit a home run.
Where'd she fail?
I think she could have been much more descriptive. Could have done a better job of trying to put the jury in her shoes, because that's what the charge of the court from the judge said. When you're viewing this evidence, you have to view it from her perspective as a trained police officer. So she probably could have been more descriptive, done a better job of saying, this is who I am, this is how I see things, this is what I was feeling that day, and this is why I did what I did.
Wow, are you surprised at how quickly this verdict came out? Also, we're seeing that's her mother and either her father or stepfather, her family members also reacting to this verdict. Were you surprised, though, by how quickly this verdict came back?
A little bit, yes, especially this morning, because I felt like if they didn't come to a verdict yesterday afternoon, then what I was taking from that was that neither side's message just immediately cut through all the things that they had to consider. So neither side had the clear message. So I figured, well, if they didn't come back yesterday, they're going to really dig in and spend some time today. I don't know exactly when they informed the judge that the verdict had come through. I know it's probably they've only been deliberating for 2.5 hours max this morning. So
they came back in at 8:30, so
okay.
It was 2 hours at the most, and 4 hours yesterday, so 6 hours total.
Yeah,
for them to work their way through a fairly complicated jury charge.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like they pretty quickly came to a decision. We don't buy her story.
Right. I think that's probably right. And so I expected them to deliberate a little longer, considering the complexity and the issues they had to go through.
Their questions this morning, they asked for the definitions of manslaughter and the Castle Doctrine, and they asked for an exhibit, although we don't know what that exhibit was. Any thoughts on why they would have asked that question?
Well, when I heard that, my first inkling was that, okay, so there's at least some people back there who are open to the idea of mistake of fact, because you don't get to the Castle Doctrine without the premise of mistake of fact. You don't even get there. So that was telling me that there are at least some people back on the jury who were at least open to the idea. The Castle Doctrine also probably take that another step further, because if they had questions about it, granted it's a complicated piece of the law, but if they had questions about it, it meant that at least there were some people who were open to seeing how that would apply in these facts. And then coupled with manslaughter made me think, okay, maybe there's a good number of jurors back there who are not going to go murder. They're going to go in a different direction. Often what happens sometimes when you get a question like that and the judge gives a response like Judge Kemp rightly did in this case, I can't tell you more than what I've already told you. Jurors will probably go back and say, well, okay, then not to say that they need to move on, but the judge has given us what we need. Let's just look through this document one more time, take a vote, and the verdict comes.
It seems like the prosecution did a pretty good job of painting her as unlikable with all these issues of sexting with her partner, and just, you think, what were your thoughts on that?
Well, I think if they didn't like her, that was one way to begin to not trust her, or not to take her at her version as the way that they ought to go. You know, I often think that jurors are looking for one side or the other to say, okay, you're the team that I can trust you. You're helping me through this process. Your version of the facts sounds more reasonable than the other side's. But if they don't like you, or that could begin to break that down or prevent it from being established in the first place.
Okay, we have Rebecca Lopez on the phone. Rebecca, are you there?
Yeah, I'm actually here with our live picture. You can see our camera here. We're waiting for the family to come out of the courtroom and their lawyers to come out and speak. As we've been reporting, as soon as the verdict was read, and Botham Jean's mom threw up her hands. There were cheers that went out across this courthouse from supporters of Botham Jean's family. Okay, now you see that there are security guards. There's fire marshals here. They're trying to clear the media out of these area where the family is expected to come and talk, but there is a lot of security here. There's hundreds of press here from all over the country. They're trying to get us to move back, but there's just a ton of people, and we're waiting for them to come out and speak to us. A little while ago, you could see where they had a flag that they were waving, and it was a flag from St. Lucia. That is Botham Jean's home country, where he came here from. His family flew in about a week ago to be here for the trial. We're waiting for the parents again to come out, and also the attorneys who have basically been the spokesperson for the family, since right now they cannot talk. Both parents and some other family members are witnesses in the punishment phase. They have been on the witness list for quite some time. There is still a gag order on the witnesses, so we're not sure if we're actually going to get any reaction from Botham Jean's parents, but we are expecting their attorneys to come out. I think that there are a lot of people, even the attorneys for Botham Jean's family, that were thinking this was going to come down to manslaughter. So I do believe that this verdict took them by surprise. It took a lot of people here by surprise that she was in fact convicted of murder. And as you've mentioned, she now faces 99 years in prison, up to 99 years in prison. We're also going to see if there's any reaction from Amber Guyger's family and from prosecutors about this case. I think prosecutors were hoping that their defense lawyers would come out and talk. We're also hoping that the prosecution will eventually come out and talk, but probably not at this stage because there's still a second phase of this trial that they have to go through, and that is the sentencing, which starts always in Texas, always immediately after a guilty verdict is rendered. They start the punishment phase. That's where we are right now. There are a lot of security guards around. There have been people in this trial that have received death threats on both sides, and so the security is very tight around the families, around Amber Guyger's family, around the lawyers, around even the Dallas Police Association President Mike Mata, who has taken a lot of heat during this trial. So there's a lot of security across the city right now. Dallas Police has 2 command posts set up across the city, so we'll see what the reaction is from the community. And we saw earlier that they were and yelling, hooting and hollering like it was victory for them, for the activists and the people have always wanted Amber Guyger actually convicted of murder. Telling us that they're trying to clear this area, but there are hundreds of media, print, TV, trying to get the media to move out of the way, but no one's really budging too much. That's what's happening here at the courthouse right now.
That way. Leave it to where people can walk through here. If you have all these poles hanging out, they're going to trip and fall. We have people trying to get to these courts, please, okay?
So there's other things happening at the courthouse. Obviously, there's other trials. This is, so that's what's happening. They're trying to get the media to clear out, at least give a pathway so that people who are coming in and out of the courthouse to do business can continue to do business. So that's what's happening here, trying to get the media in line while we wait for everyone else to come out and talk.
Hey, Rebecca, I'm not sure if you can hear me. I know it's loud and there's a lot going on. This is Kara. I was just curious if you had seen anyone. I'm looking at video right now in the courtroom of Amber Guyger's family sitting there, obviously pretty emotional. Have you seen anyone come out of that area who was supportive of Amber Guyger? I know you've seen a lot of people supportive of Botham Jean.
Not one person. We've seen Amber Guyger's mom and her stepfather throughout the trial. They've been walking back and forth, during going in and out of breaks, and we've seen them here throughout the trial. But no one from Amber Guyger's family has come out. They have been taking Amber Guyger through a separate entrance. Typically, the defendant comes out through the courthouse and through the normal means that everybody else goes through. But again, there have been multiple death threats against Amber Guyger, and so they have been concerned about her safety as well as the family and other people surrounding this trial. So they have been taking Amber Guyger out a different area, and I believe that maybe that's probably what they're going to do with her family at this point. I don't suspect that they're going to come through this horde of media, that they do have ways that they would get her family out of the courthouse so that they don't have to face all of this that's out here right now. But I do suspect that we will be seeing the lawyers for Botham Jean's family come out. They're really about the only ones that can talk. Prosecutors still can't talk. Defense attorneys can't talk. the witnesses that are going to be called in the punishment phase can't talk. So I wouldn't suspect that we're going to hear from a whole lot of people at this phase. We will not hear from everybody until the punishment phase is over and they decide how many years Amber Guyger is going to spend in prison.
Well, for people who are just joining us right now, we are live this moment talking to Rebecca Lopez, who is at the courthouse after Amber Guyger was found guilty of murder about 20 minutes ago. And we are in midday right now. We're going to keep with this story, obviously. And Rebecca, we've been hearing from our legal expert over at our Young Street location, talking to Tanya Iser. And a lot of folks seem to be pretty surprised that this jury came back so quickly. Did it catch people off guard? Did it seem to catch people off guard there at the courthouse? I'm not really sure if you can speak to perhaps how people are feeling, but just kind of the commotion that was going on before all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. It caught everybody off guard because the jury had just sent out a question maybe a few minutes before asking for an exhibit. So they were wanting to see another exhibit. They just sent out 2 questions about the definition of manslaughter and the Castle Doctrine. Amber Guyger's lawyer, or Botham Jean's family lawyers came out and they talked about that. And so they said, this is not going to be a quick verdict. Everybody was expecting that this jury was going to deliberate a lot longer. They brought up other cases of in the Jordan Edwards case where Roy Oliver, a police officer out of Balch Springs, had shot an innocent teenager, and he was found guilty of murder. It took that jury 15 or so hours to render that guilty verdict. So Botham Jean's family lawyers were saying, we expect this to take a while. We were just all sitting around. Typically what happens is a red light goes off in the courtroom, and then we know, okay, there's a verdict, and they give everybody time to come down and prepare for the verdict, but none of that happened. The red light didn't go off. All of a sudden, we started seeing sheriff's deputies go into the courtroom, and a lot of them. And we had a producer that was sitting outside, and he's like, Rebecca, something's going on because there's a lot of deputies going into the courtroom, and that's typically what happens.
And they Rebecca,
block the entrance in high profile.
Not to interrupt you real quick, but it looks like Amber Guyger's family is being escorted out. Do you see anything down there, or are they taking them out a different way like you suspected?
I don't see them from this point of view. Y'all are probably seeing them. Sometimes they take them into a little room.
Okay.
I will tell you that there are Dallas police criminal intelligence officers here. There's that would usually do like protection service and stuff like that. So they may be trying to escort them out that way. They're trying to clear the area. The deputies. So I suspect that maybe they will be leaving the courthouse under police escort.
And Rebecca, I'm sorry to circle back with you. You were saying that there was sort of a flurry of activity, and all of a sudden there were sheriff's deputies around. So obviously that alerted you all to, hey, something's going on.
Yeah, so there was all these deputies that came into the courtroom, and then we started hearing there might be a verdict. And the first person that tweeted out that there was a verdict was one of Botham Jean's family lawyers, and that was Lee Merritt, who is civil rights attorney here in Dallas, and he tweeted out there's a verdict. And then we saw Botham Jean's family come down, the parents come through the security checkpoint here, and then everybody just started rushing into the courtroom. And then, they read the verdict, and it caught everyone, honestly, by surprise. And if you talk to people around the courthouse, they are surprised. This jury went through that jury charge pretty quickly, and that this verdict came down as fast as it did. I think that people were expecting this jury to deliberate a lot longer. They had a lot to consider, but they obviously rejected the defense's arguments that this was a mistake of fact and that Amber Guyger should get off because she mistakenly thought she was in her apartment. They said she intentionally pulled that trigger, and with that intent, she is convicted of murder.
And I'm just getting some more information, but before we talk about that and about the statement regarding that's going to be coming from Botham Jean's family, we're going to get to Demond, who I believe is also in the courtroom. Okay, so we're going to go to him right now.
Demond, you're on.
Hey, Demond. Hey, Demond, it's Kara.
Hey, guys. Right now I'm with Bridget Brown. She's one of the community members who've been... Hey, Kara. I'm with one of the community members who've been watching this trial all week long. This is Bridget Brown right here. Bridget, you were in the courtroom when the verdict was read this morning. What was your immediate reaction?
I was so thankful. I immediately said, thank you, Lord, because we've been praying for justice for Botham Jean.
Do you have any personal connection to the family?
No, I just became close with them throughout the process, throughout the trial.
Now, I've seen you here in the courthouse all week long. How tough has it been watching this unfold?
It's been very emotional and nerve-wracking as well, and we've lost a lot of sleep. I could barely sleep each night thinking about and wondering what the jurors were going to decide.
There's been so much evidence unfolded during this trial. I know it's been kind of eye-raising for a lot of community members.
Yes.
Did you have any doubt that the jury would make this decision, Bridget?
Well, we were unsure because they did have several options to choose from. They were able to choose from manslaughter, murder, or not guilty. So we were concerned because we just never know how jurors will go on things.
And Bridget, from your perspective, what was the toughest part of watching this trial?
Really knowing the outcome and what the verdict would be, because we've just been praying for justice for Botham Jean.
What message does this send to the community members?
I think we can have hope now. I think we can see progress going forward now.
You've been with the family all week. You've been praying with them.
Yes.
How do you think they're doing in this moment right now?
Oh my gosh, they're very emotional right now, just as I am. Just so happy. We're so filled with joy right now.
You look like you're still shaking a little bit,
Yes,
Bridget.
I'm just so happy and excited and thankful to God.
Were you nervous that the jury wouldn't come with this decision?
We just weren't sure. Again, we never know how jurors are going to go with things, what direction they're going to take things.
And as we wrap this up, do you have any message for community members right now? I know that in a few, the jury's going to be back inside the courtroom. All sides are going to be back because the sentencing phase will start. We want the community to keep in mind as well. We still continue to watch this play out.
Yes, we will be continuing to watch, and we just still praying that she'll be served justice and regarding the sentencing as well.
And Bridget, one thing that I did notice all week, you've been coming here every day wearing the color red.
Yes,
Why
the family decided that we wanted to all come in solidarity and wear red.
Yeah, and you guys, I've been seeing so many community members wearing red all week, standing in solidarity with Botham Jean's family. It's a lot of chaos in the courthouse right now. A lot of people just trying to witness this moment and wait to see what happens next. Again, this is Bridget Brown here, and she represents the sounds that we've been hearing from a lot of community members up here right now.
Thank you.
Kara?
Okay, Damon, thanks so much. We appreciate it. Yeah, we know a lot's happening right now. If you are just joining us for midday, we are covering the Amber Guyger murder trial. She was just found guilty about 30 minutes ago of murder, and now there's going to be an extended break until 1 o'clock, a recess, and the jury will come back and they will start the sentencing phase. Amber Guyger faces 5 to 99 years in prison because of this conviction. Now, we've been getting reaction, as you just saw, from Demond, and we've been hearing from Rebecca Lopez, but we do want to read you a statement that was provided to us from attorney Ben Crump. This coming in, he is the personal injury and civil attorney to the family of Botham Jean. Today, he issued this statement regarding that guilty verdict, and here's what it says. Nothing will bring Botham back, but today his family has found some measure of justice. What happened on September 6, 2018 is clear to everyone. The officer saw a black man and shot without reason and without justification. I'm getting word now that the defense attorney is coming out. We're going to go listen to that right now. This is Amber Guyger's defense attorney. Is that correct?
Well,
all right, I apologize. He just passed. He's not speaking. We'll go back out to Rebecca Lopez. So obviously, Rebecca, there's a flurry of activity going on. We're waiting for someone to come and talk, which is why people, I think, are getting anxious to hear from both sides.
Yes, Robert Rogers, the main defense attorney for Amber Guyger, just came out, and we tried asking him questions. And of course, as I've been reporting, there is a gag order still on the lawyers until the punishment phase is over and done with. And so we're waiting for them to eventually talk, but that will not happen until the punishment phase is over. And Amber Guyger, by the way, will be taken into custody. Typically what happens is once they are found guilty of a crime, they are then come in handcuffs. I recall that in other cases they do put them in the prison jumpsuits. I don't know that that's going to happen particularly, but she will definitely come out. There is Dominique Alexander, who is a community activist, and I guess he's going to say something, so let's hear what he has to say.
What's your reaction? I don't want to assume that
speak on the behalf of this family, but as a community leader who have been fighting continuously towards police corruption in Dallas, I know I speak for our community who has labored, who has sat incarcerated, who has marched the streets, who has sacrificed so much for this movement. To the Dallas 9, to all of the people who are here, I want to say thank you.
Yes.
Because of your sacrifice, this family is able to see some form of justice in Dallas, Texas, where many people at large in the community felt like it was hopeless. I'm so grateful to God that we see a guilty verdict. But the work is, my name is Minister Dominique Alexander, President of the Next Generation Action Network. The work is not done yet, y'all. Because one of the things that we saw in this trial with Amber Guyger is that Amber Guyger wasn't the only thing that stood trial. It was the Dallas Police Department.
Yes.
We saw corruption loud and clear.
Yes.
We saw the failures of the police department. Yes. We saw the failures of lack of policies, lack of accountability to the highest level. Yes. I thought at this time that we would be walking into DPD headquarters filing a complaint against the Dallas Police Association President Michael Mata. But we got something so great. Because of the community work, because of what the sacrifices of all of our ancestors and people who fought on the streets in the 80s after the shooting death of Santos Rodriguez, Etta Collins, we now have, on the day that the new ordinance of the Office of Police Civilian Oversight, we now have a guilty verdict of a Dallas police officer in the city of Dallas. We have a form of justice. We have where communities can now have a voice, now can have their complaints listened to. And guess what? Let me say this. My comments is not against the man or the woman in the badge. My comments is against the culture of policing in America. The culture of policing is why we have to get to this moment. But I tell you, our community is overwhelmed with joy, happiness, and overwhelmingly, we're going to celebrate tonight on this courthouse steps at 6:30. Tonight, we're going to celebrate justice. And we're going to also say that it's not over.
It's not over.
Dominique, Dominique, did you expect a murder conviction?
What are you committed to doing next?
We're committed to fighting justice. But the family.
John's family and lawyers, we got to switch around, you guys. The family is about to talk. We're going to walk through this media frenzy to try and get over. The family came over to the other side, so I'm working my way through the hordes of media to try and get a shot of the family and hear what they have to say.
Come on,
one
guys.
moment, you guys. This is quite a challenge. Excuse me. Family is here. The lawyer. Okay, here we go.
Hold on, guys. Hold on, guys. Let's just back up a little bit, please. Okay, let's. You're good. I'm sorry. Thank you. Dale, I'm gonna reach around there. Okay. Okay. Here goes the time. Okay. That's all I got. Thank you. Okay, ready?
Who's speaking first? Who's speaking first? I am.
Lee gonna go first.
Everybody ready? All right. I don't think people are ready yet.
Get them.
Yeah, they're ready.
Yeah,
already
All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. Lee Merritt, one of the family attorneys, along with Brother Ben Crump, and Mr. Darrell Washington. Shortly going to hear from the family, and they just want to thank this community. They want to thank the people of Dallas County. They want to thank this jury for taking their time, hearing the evidence, and getting it right. We still have the sentencing phase to go, but this is a huge victory, not only for the family of Botham Jean, But as his mother Allison told me a moment ago, this is a victory for black people in America. It's a signal that the tide is going to change here. Police officers are going to begin to be held accountable for their actions, and we believe that will begin to change policing culture all over the world. It's a sad reality that this community waited on pins and needles to decide whether or not someone could be held guilty for killing an unarmed black man in his home while eating ice cream. This should have been automatic. This should have been anticipated and expected, but it is extremely rare. And from this day forward, we're leading the way. We are pushing so that it is not rare, but that this is common, that justice continues to roll down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream.
Yes. We said it all along. When Tobias Mackey was killed, no one thought it was a problem. When James Harper was killed, nobody thought it was a problem. Clinton Allen was killed. We still didn't believe when we said we had training issues within the Dallas Police Department. It took us losing someone like Botham for Dallas, this entire state, and the whole world to finally hear what we've been saying all along. There are serious issues within the Dallas Police Department and training issues. We were here just a few months ago when Roy Oliver was convicted for the murder of Jordan Edwards. And now we're here today because Amber Guyger has now been convicted of murder for the death of Botham. And we just hope that somehow, some way, we can get some healing in this community and we can get the proper training so no other family can have to deal with what Bertram and Miss Allison, Alicia, and Brant are now dealing with. Although we got a murder conviction, their lives will never be the same, ever again. But we just hope that now people who live in the South Side flats, people who live in houses that look identical, this ruling will now say that you are safe to be in your homes and people can no longer just say, I made a mistake and took your life.
I am Attorney Ben Crump along with Attorney Darrell Washington and Attorney Lee Merritt. Brothers, I'm so very honored to be in the foxhole. We're fighting for justice for this great family of Botham Jean and to make history today in America. To make history today in America.
Absolutely.
You know, Botham Jean was a near perfect person of color. So this jury had to make history in America today because Botham was the best that we had to offer. A 26-year-old college-educated black man, certified public accountant, working for one of the big 3 accounting firms in the world, PricewaterhouseCoopers. But it shouldn't take all of that for unarmed black and brown people in America to get justice. Like Attorney Merritt and Attorney Washington said, this is a precedence now that will go forth across America for equal justice under the law for everybody. Whether you black, white, red, brown, it doesn't matter. And this verdict is for Trayvon Martin, it's for Michael Brown, it's for Sandra Bland, it's for Tamir Rice, it's for Eric Gardner, it's for Antoine Rose, it's for Jamel Roberts, for E.J. Bradford, for Stephon Clark, for Jeffrey Dennis, Genevieve Dawes, for Pamela Turner, for so many unarmed black and brown human beings all across America. This verdict today is for them. Everybody can raise their hands. This verdict is for them. This verdict is for them.
We love you. Thank you.
I just had the district attorney's office tap me on my shoulder, and because the sentencing phase is coming up where the family will testify, they've asked that I withhold their statements. I do want to relay what this family has always stood on, and it's their faith in God, and it's their belief in Christ Jesus. And it was Botham's faith that we believe played a key factor in that, and because of that, I'm going to ask Botham's pastor, Pastor Barry, to come forward and give a statement.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to say that on behalf of the faith community here in Dallas, in the state of Texas, and also here in the U.S., and on behalf of the Dallas area preachers and church leaders, this verdict is exactly what we were looking for. I want to say thank you to the jurors for being willing to make that tough decision. I want to say thank you to the prosecutors for the excellent job that they did. And now we're just going to move forward and continue to respond in the appropriate way going forward. But we just want to say, and the other thing that I want to say is that this also lets us know that the God that we serve is still on the throne.
That's right.
Yeah.
God is still in control.
Amen.
And he has been all along. I have some other of my associates with me, Jonathan Morrison, and also Colin Packer. I'd like for them to have comments.
Okay. What we're going to do at this time is we're going to take a few questions and we're going to take a family back.
Lee, what do you want to see? 5 to 99 years. What do you think Amber Guyger deserves?
We believe in the wisdom of this jury. That decision is in the hands of this jury, and so we believe that Botham's life mattered, and we want to see a sentence that reflects that.
Yeah. And many people, a lot of commentators said there would be no murder conviction. Right. So right now we're already ahead of the game, and we welcome the jury's decision, as Attorney Merritt and Attorney Washington have said.
What we do know, though, is that Amber Guyger got on the stand and she testified without a doubt that she intended to kill Botham. And we just hope that the jury remembers that this is an individual that says she didn't make a mistake, she intended to kill, and we think that the sentence that they give her should reflect that.
You all know what? Imagine what the sentence would be if the roles were reversed and Botham Jean killed Amber Guyger. Why can't it be equal justice in America, no matter what the ethnicity of the murderer is?
And 2 days after she killed Botham, she was back sexting and talking about getting drunk. So this is a person that has no remorse. This is a person being in jail for 5 to 6 years will not be enough. So we want the sentence to definitely reflect that.
Do you worry about an appeal?
What was your sense of hearing the concept of mistake of fact and Castle doctrine?
Well, here's what we know, and I'll let Lee talk, but here's what we know. We did not think mistake of fact and the Castle doctrine should have gotten in there, but what the family know today and what we feel comfortable about, there's really nothing that the defense is going to be able to appeal. They got everything that they wanted, so, and they did not get the verdict that they wanted, so we feel good about that.
And I'll just reiterate that the mistake of fact, and particularly the Castle doctrine, was asinine to go before this jury. Yeah. They had no business asserting the Castle doctrine in someone else's home. I'm glad that the jury simply rejected that, and we can move forward from there.
Were you surprised by, I'm sorry, Mr. Crump.
No, I was just going to say, when you think about the Castle doctrine, it really reminds you a lot of stand your ground when you come up with an intellectual justification to justify the killing of an unarmed black person. Thank God the jury did not accept it.
Exactly.
And can you just give us were you surprised by this verdict?
No. If you sit number one, and I said if we were calling the game, if we were calling this like a game, the score was 92-0 the entire time. The only concern was that the jury instructions. It bothered me that those would go back. And in that case, you could have a runaway jury, in a sense, that would go against the entire weight of the evidence. But when it's all said and done, you had someone who was completely unarmed, completely nonviolent, completely non-aggressive, sitting at his home, eating a bowl of ice cream, and someone barged into his home and shot him to death. And so when this family contacted us the day after this murder, we believed that the right conviction would happen. We believed that the right verdict would come out as guilty. We knew that in America that's rare. We knew we had a fight on our hands, but there were all the pieces in place. And I'll tell you what, this was a perfect storm of events in terms of the justice system working together. You had a motivated district attorney's office who put on an excellent case. You had a progressive judge who made the right calls from the bench, and you had a Dallas County community that responded to the call to serve on these juries, as we need them to continue to do. So you had one of the most diverse juries that we ever seen. And when all those things worked together, I was convicted. I was certain of a conviction in this case.
And let me say this. This Dallas County has a precedence unlike anybody else in America. Remember Jordan Edwards' case. Right. District Attorney Faith Johnson made sure that that young unarmed child's life was not in vain when they got a conviction there. And now to get a conviction here, hopefully all the rest of the cities all across the United States will learn from Dallas, Texas, that justice means equal justice.
And one final thing that we said it before, what Mike Rivera did by deleting those text messages, that is something that just cannot go away.
That's right.
Because that was clear tampering with evidence. And that's going to be something that we're going to follow up on, and we're going to make sure that the Dallas Police Department is following the proper procedures, because as a result of not following up on people like Mike Rivera, there's a mother that we talked to who Mike Rivera took her son's life that's still dealing with that from 2007. So we need to make sure that that's followed up on.
What this trial did was it pulled the veil back, and we saw the kind of things that lead to unfair acquittals of police officers. Yeah. We saw a corrupt Dallas Police Department that actively engaged in covering for, excusing, and justifying the unjustifiable. And now that that veil has been pulled back, we've all seen it now. Right. And we have an obligation on behalf of this family. We have each of us in this community has an obligation to go after the bad actors who tried to cover this murder up from the beginning. That's including her pardon Martin Rivera. That's including Mike Mata of the Dallas Police Officers Association. We call on Chief Hall to clean house, because we're going to go about the business of cleaning house for her.
There you go. So those were the attorneys for Botham Jean's family, also putting the Dallas Police Department under indictment, saying that they want a clean house. I do suspect that Dallas Police Association President Mike Mata at some point will respond. There is going to be an internal affairs complaint filed against him. That has not happened yet, but I do suspect that the Dallas Police Association is going to answer back to some of the allegations here that were given by Botham Jean's family. Obviously, the family is not able to talk. We want to hear from the family, but again, as I mentioned earlier, they're under a gag order. They are expected to testify. Botham Jean's family, or mother rather, is going to be one of the first ones to testify. And so we are watching the family leaving right now as they get in the elevator, and then they'll be back up here because we will start the punishment phase in this trial this afternoon. They will have opening statements, and then they will begin taking witnesses, or calling witnesses to the stand. That is what is happening here at the courthouse. If you heard some of the civil rights lawyers saying that this verdict is for other cases across the country that they have have been activists for. And so they believe that this verdict sends a strong message to people across the country about police-involved type shootings. And I believe we're going to Damon now because he has in standing with some community activists.
Rebecca, I'm standing with Zena West Lewis right now. She was a church member of Botham Jean's. You've been monitoring this case all week. What's your reaction to the jury's verdict today?
I screamed out and cried because justice has been served. We have been wanting this for years. Back in '97, I did protesting. I got beat up by 12 officers. Now they're seeing that there are corruption. Back then, they wasn't seeing that.
So you're not only connected to the Jean family through faith connections through the church, you've also been an activist out in the streets.
Yes.
What message does this jury's verdict send to the greater community?
It sends a great one, because it let them know that because you're in blue, you're not right. You're not always right. I mean, we walk across the street, police coming to us. I mean, we know that we have our rights.
How optimistic were you that the jury would come with this decision?
I already knew it. When she said she intended to kill him, that intent said murder.
You sat in the courtroom watching this case.
Since day one.
In the hallways. How tough was it hearing the evidence unfold?
It was very Very much.
I know for a long time, for a year now, people who knew Botham Jean have been asking for the facts and transparency. And you guys got an eye look into some of the things that no one knew. I can imagine it was shocking for those who knew him and shocking for community members. How tough was it sitting there watching and listening to all those facts?
To me, it was more hurtful to see her sit up on the jury and to call him a silhouette. Knowing that the TV's on and there is a computer on, you had to see him.
What do you want people to remember most about Botham Jean?
His smile, his singing voice, and know that God loves him and he's with heaven. He's in heaven.
I've heard several activists and community members and even faith leaders say there's more work to do.
Very much.
What work needs to be done in the community in Dallas?
Actually, there's cases that our officers has attacked other people that needs to be addressed. And not only that, the officers that tried to cover up corruption, they needs to be addressed.
I know the jury still has to do some work. Sentencing phase started. You're going to be sitting through that?
Yes, I will.
Zena, thanks so much for your time.
And not only that, I work with Judge Howard, Janine Howard. We have the First Friday program on 6th floor.
Zena, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
And Kara, what you heard Zena say, she's echoing the sentiments from many community members who've been watching this case over the past year and watching this trial over the past week. Many people very emotional. People still have answers about what happened that night. Many people still have answers about what to do or questions about what to do moving forward. You ladies have been watching this too? You guys are community members here in Dallas?
Huh?
You guys are community members here in Dallas as well?
Yes.
What's your reaction to this jury's verdict?
I was ecstatic. I was so happy. I wanted to cry when I was sitting in the courtroom when the judge said the verdict. I wanted to bust out crying because I have a black son, and it's not only they killing black males, black females.
What's your name for me?
Sheila Bennett.
Sheila, what was your biggest fear or concern sitting and watching this trial every day?
That she was going to get off scot-free. But both of them didn't get off scot-free. He's not here anymore. And
But based on what you heard this week, over the past week, what do you want community members to remember most?
that it's not about race. It's about justice. That's what I want to remember, justice.
Thanks so much, Sheila. And you've been monitoring this trial as well? I heard you in the background a moment ago shouting out some victims of police violence. What's your name for me?
My name is Glow
Glow.
Vader.
How are you taking away this verdict?
My main concern with this whole time has been for the family, and over the course of the last year, we've attended rallies and vigils and the gala that happened on Sunday night, and I've gotten to know the family, and they are at the forefront of my thoughts.
And you know, ladies, this is a case that's not only had local attention, but national attention, even international attention, considering they're from St. Lucia. You got to be familiar with the family.
Yes.
How important was it for the community members to be surrounding this family?
So important. Every time that I see them, I hug them and I tell them I love you. And even when they leave, we will still be here and we will still be doing the work. And I think that that gave them comfort.
Glow and Sheila, thank you guys so much. And Kara, what you heard from these ladies here, again, echoing sentiments that we've heard from community members across Dallas. You know, it's different right now, a different feel around this courtroom. All week long, I've noticed that there was a certain sense of tension and just wondering what was going to happen today. Community members got the answer from the jury with that guilty verdict against Amber Guyger. Kara, we'll be talking to community members and giving you some glimpse of what's on their hearts and minds right now. Kara?
Damon, thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, hearing from a lot of people in that courthouse this midday who didn't know Botham Jean, didn't know his family, but because of the outcome of this trial, they have gotten to know his family, and they say that it will impact them for their lifetime. So just resetting a little bit right here, if you are just joining us on midday, we do have a guilty verdict of murder in the Amber Guyger trial. We want to show you that reaction that happened a little more than a half hour ago.
The jury having reached a verdict, Ms. Geiger and your team, would you please stand? We, the jury, unanimously find the defendant, Amber Guyger, guilty of murder as charged in the indictment. No outburst. And it is signed by the presiding juror, who is juror number 11. Mr. Rogers, would you like to have the jury poll?
No, Your Honor.
All right. You may be seated, Ms. Geiger. We're going to take a break. You all have a long lunch.
You heard that stern reaction from the judge asking people not to show reaction, but you could hear audible gasps were told from people who were in the courtroom, cheering, and a lot of crying coming from Botham Jean's family. Now, we cannot hear from Botham Jean's family at this point because they are still going to be witnesses in the sentencing phase, which is set to begin at about 1 o'clock. But we do know there was a message, yes, Lord, you never failed me yet. Hashtag Justice for Botham. That was written by Allison Jean, Botham's mother, on her Facebook page. That was shortly after the verdict. So while she cannot speak specifically with media, she did post to that social media not long ago. And we're also seeing, obviously, the other side of this courtroom, which is Amber Guyger. We have yet to see her face, but I do know that she was crying. When you're looking at this video, you see her bringing a tissue up to her eyes. And of course, her family having a much different reaction, sitting behind her for some time, just kind of holding each other and crying as well. They have since left the courtroom and been taken to a location that we do not know of. But at this point right now, we're all waiting for that sentencing phase to begin in a little over an hour. Tanya Iser is with us. She has been following this case. She is at our studios, and she's got some legal analysis and some expert analysis as we move forward into what's happening now. Okay, so we're having some mic issues. I can kind of hear a little bit of an echo. So we're going to try to get back to Tanya in our Young Street location here in just a minute. But at this point right now, we are waiting to hear. We're back. Sorry, I'm getting a couple of different things in my ear. We're going to go back out to Rebecca Lopez right now. Rebecca, right now we are seeing still a flurry of excitement from people. We understand there's going to be a celebration at 6:30 tonight on the courthouse steps from people who are excited about the reaction and the verdict that came down, a guilty verdict of murder when it comes to Amber Guyger. Have things calmed down at all? Can you kind of let us know what's happening at this point?
There's still a lot of activity here. You have to remember, this is a historic day. Amber Guyger is the first female officer convicted in Dallas County and obviously a DPD of murder. And the last Dallas police officer that was convicted of murder was back in the 70s, and it was an officer that killed a teenage boy in the back of a squad car as he was handcuffed, Santos Rodriguez. You heard one of the community activists talk about that case a little while ago. This is historic. There was a Balch Springs officer, Roy Oliver, that was found guilty of murder earlier, about several months back, of shooting and killing Jordan Edwards, an unarmed teenager that was in a car and was driving away from a party, and he fired into that car and killed him. So it is historic. There's never been a female officer in Dallas County convicted of murder, and only 2 Dallas police officers that I can recall in the history of DPD that have been convicted of murder. So that is why this is such a big deal, and here in Dallas County, and obviously across the nation, as you heard some of the community activists say, it is difficult to get police officers convicted of murder. This is something that a lot of community activists have been pushing for nationwide, have more officers that use excessive force or kill unarmed people to be taken to trial for murder, to fight it in the court system. So it's a big day here. Back to you guys.
Yeah, Rebecca, I want to hang on to you for a second, because as you mentioned, a historic day. You have been with WFAA and in the Dallas community for a long time. You've seen a lot of different court cases and trials. Comparatively speaking, this is unlike any other.
This is unlike anything that has ever happened in the city of Dallas and DPD. I mean, there have been other cases where officers were arrested and charged with aggravated assault. There's been a couple of Dallas police officers that have pled guilty in those cases involving unarmed people. But this is unlike anything I've ever seen. I'll never forget the morning when I got the phone call saying a Dallas police officer in uniform that was off duty went into an apartment and shot and killed an innocent man. And I couldn't have been more shocked. I think no one was prepared. I think even Dallas police were unsure how to handle the case in the beginning. Should it be an officer-involved shooting? Should she be treated as a citizen? There was a lot of debate that went on between the DA's office, the Dallas Police Department, the Texas Rangers, how to handle this case, because it is unique, it's unusual. I don't think anybody had ever seen anything like this. And so for this jury to take a look at this case now and come back with a guilty verdict is historic, it's huge, and it definitely sends a message that resonates across the nation.
I mean, I know this specific case was talking about Botham Jean and Amber Guyger, but this is resonating with so many people, as we heard, with so many different names that were listed off by Botham Jean's attorneys in regards to other cases for African Americans who have been shot and killed by police officers. So obviously a lot of excitement in there today. Have you seen any sign of Amber Guyger's family? And at this point, we understand we're about an hour away from when sentencing will begin.
Yeah, I think that what they did with Amber Guyger's family is there's a way to go out through the judge's, there's like a judge's exit out of the courtroom, so I suspect that they took them out that way. I do not believe that they would have wanted to be taken through the media. There's literally media from all across the world here right now, as you can hear everyone talking around me. So I don't suspect that we're going to hear anything from Amber Guyger's family. This is a family that has received death threats. Some have lost their jobs. There's been a lot of ramifications for her family as well because of her actions, and so they are protecting the family right now and moving them out of the courthouse quietly. Back to you.
Well, Rebecca, we appreciate the insight. We're going to go back to Tanya Iser right now. We'll check back in with you soon. I know a lot's still going on as we get ready for that sentencing phase. And then that sentencing phase, we're going to have Tanya Iser come in. She has some legal analysis for us and really giving us some insight on what exactly Amber Guyger could face. Obviously, looking at this murder conviction today and the fact that it came back so quickly, a lot of things could happen that could maybe surprise or be considered unexpected, Tanya.
I'm joined by Judge Rob Conyers, a former Judge Rob Conyers. Judge, the sentencing phase is set to begin at 1 o'clock. What can folks expect to see?
Well, what they're going to expect is it'll look very similar to the guilt innocence, but at this phase of the trial, you'll hear more about the effect that the murder had on Mr. Jean's family, and what their family had to go through. You'll hear a lot of sympathy, a lot of emotion, I'm sure, from them. Yeah, I would expect that the prosecution is also going to rehash some of the key evidence and make some kind of argument that this wasn't just a tragedy; it was preventable, and even point out some of Ms. Geiger's her actions after the shooting, some of the stuff that might show her maybe she didn't have a lot of sympathy, maybe she just kind of went on with her life, that kind of thing, to get the jury to a point where they could come back with a heavy sentence. And Ms. Geiger will also have the opportunity to present evidence, most likely from maybe her family, co-workers, people who have served with her, to say, that's not my daughter, that's not my friend, that she's not like that.
Do you think we'll hear from Amber Guyger again?
I wouldn't be shocked. I wouldn't be shocked at this phase of the trial. She'll get up there and say, I disagree with the verdict, but I respect it, and have mercy on me because this being a police officer was my dream, and so on and so on. You'll hear things like that. So I think she needs to get up there again and do a better job of maybe having an emotional connection with the jury. Excuse me, with the jury.
We've had two other officers, Farmers Branch officer Ken Johnson, who was sentenced to 10 years for chasing down a teen burglar and shooting and killing him. We also had Roy Oliver, who shot into a fleeing car, and he got 15 years. Ken Johnson again got 10. Any thoughts on what's going to be going into the jury's determination of what her sentence should be?
Yeah, the jury won't be able to compare. It won't be appropriate for them to compare. Well, that officer got that amount of years for that case. They won't be able to compare any of that. So they'll have to just take these facts and make a decision of 5 to 99 or life. But if those cases are kind of any guide for those of us watching about how jurors see the balance between what police officers do and the situations that they're in, that those sentences might be a guide of what might happen here.
But is the fact that they found her guilty of murder an indicator that this could be harsher?
It could be. It could be. I think, they certainly did not trust her enough to go with her mistake of fact story. And so if some of it may depend on how the jurors viewed that, if it was, well, that's not really applicable here, or did they feel like she was trying to get one over on them to get an acquittal? It's really hard to know, but I think the jury they'll have a lot of factors to consider, again, just very much like the guilt innocence.
And it's important to note that she cannot get probation.
Very important to know that she cannot get probation from the jury. From the jury. And whatever sentence she gets, she'll have to serve either half of that or a minimum of 30 years, whichever is less.
And explain to people what the rules would be in terms of her being out on an appeal.
So if the jury comes back with a sentence of 10 years or less, she'll be eligible to appeal to the judge for what we call an appellate bond. She'll notify the judge, hey judge, I'm going to appeal my guilty verdict, and I would like to be out of prison while I wait the decision of the appellate court. If the jury comes back with 11 years or higher, then she won't be eligible to appeal to the judge for that, and she'll have to wait out her appeal in prison.
Any thoughts on how long you would expect the punishment phase to last?
It's going to go quicker for sure. I'm assuming she doesn't have any type of criminal record. I'll be interested to see if she had any disciplinary issues with DPD. If barring any of that, then it's basically, what effect did this crime have on the victim's family, on her family, and how she's going to appeal to the jury for leniency.
Well, we saw her mother in the courtroom, so pretty good chance that we'll hear from Amber Guyger's mother.
Yeah, I was a little surprised that we didn't hear from one of them in the guilt innocence phase. I would be even more shocked if we don't hear from a family member, a friend, a coworker, somebody who can say Amber Guyger is not the person that the prosecution says she is.
And similar to guilt innocence, there'll be opening statements and closing statements. It's kind of like its own little mini trial.
That's right. It's very much a mini trial. You'll hear all the same procedures will be followed again. Opening statement. The prosecution gets to go first, present their evidence. Then defense gets to put on their evidence. Then we'll have closing arguments. Then another jury charge. Jury goes back and begins deliberating. And so it's very much a mini trial.
Okay. Thank you so much, Judge Conyas. I'll send it back to Kara.
Great insight. Thank you, Tanya. We appreciate it. So again, they will continue that legal analysis, and they'll continue to dissect what the jury comes down with as far as the sentencing phase is concerned. That will be streaming live on our Facebook page, so make sure you join us for that. Tanya has been doing that with expert legal analysis all week long. We're also going to continue to stay on YouTube. We are on our social media platforms with Twitter, and as I mentioned, Facebook as well, and then we'll be back on here today at 4 o'clock. But again, if you have just tuned in to midday, we understand Amber Guyger found guilty of murder in the shooting death of Botham Jean. We have people inside the courtroom, outside the courthouse that are getting reaction, and we do anticipate that sentencing phase will start at 1 o'clock after a long recess, and that's when, as you heard Tanya mention, it'll be sort of a mini trial, and they will have people who will get back on the stand and testify, and then that possible sentence between 5 to 99 years for that murder conviction. As I mentioned again, we're always on at WFAA.com. Thank you for being with us this midday, and we'll see you back here on air at 4 o'clock.
Judge, we're back here on Facebook. So, some emotional moments. What are your thoughts on this verdict?
I am surprised to the extent that I've always thought that the prosecution had the hardest road to go down, and so, I thought I would have been less surprised if it had been manslaughter. Probably even more less surprised if it had been a criminally negligent homicide. Which I know wasn't before the jury, but just before the charge was read, maybe that might have also been appropriate. But so I am surprised that they went with murder, because they would have had to, the jury would have had to discarded her mistake of fact.
They just didn't like her and they didn't believe her.
They would have had to discard the self-defense and overcome reasonable doubt. So, the fact that they didn't like her, then that would have made it harder for them to believe her, and they really needed to believe her for her defense to work.
What did you make of some of what we heard from Lee Merritt and Ben Crump and some of the attorneys? I mean, they're framing it within this sort of all these other controversial police shootings. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, there's no doubt that there's so much tension between communities of color and law enforcement, and it goes back the whole history of the country. So I am not surprised that this case has taken on as part of that discussion. Those attorneys there, I'm assuming they're going to be the lead attorneys in the federal lawsuit, so they also have to begin setting the foundation for that lawsuit. But I think in the broader context, if some good can come out of Mr. Jean's death, is that those of us who've worked in the criminal justice system our whole careers and communities of color can continue the discussion to lead to some progress, so justice can prevail. So I understand a lot of where they're coming from.
Okay. Well, thank you, Judge. We're going to take a break and go to lunch. We will be back at 1 o'clock, and then we will, as the punishment phase begins in the Amber Guyger trial.